Hello, everyone. I'm Dennis Cerrotti. This is the Mazzini Society Report. Well, this is the last of a four-part series on Thomas Morton and his life in colonial America, the 1620s, going back to the time of the Pilgrims. Well, if you haven't watched the other three parts of the series, I encourage you after this one's over to go back and watch them. Now I'll turn it over to you, Jack. Thank you very much.
Hello again, Dennis. Hi, Nina. Hi, Yonca. And I just wanted to say quickly up front, Dennis, been so grateful for the series on Morton. Your original intention was to make the man known and heard and understood as he deserves to be by our civilization if we're going to pull ourselves out of these incredible headspins we're in. So I think you've made a really congenial success of that effort. And I hope people have enjoyed it and that we'll hear from them and go on together, even as we're going to mention later, toward a Morton movie, full feature film about Thomas Morton's life and trajectory, because people need to know this. I thought the most useful thing, even though we've been through this a couple of times in earlier episodes, would be to add a really bare bones, lightning fast summary of Morton's life and trajectory, just so it stays in people's mind a little bit. And then I'd like to pose a question to all of you that relates out of his work, and that would be something like this. Was Morton a romantic? Was he a utopian? Was his love and affection for American nature effective? Can we show his influences down the years? Or was he kind of a sucker to the game? In other words, a lover of nature who thought that he could somehow make his own life within this colonial machine that was about to try to exterminate the Pequots. See what I mean? Was he just really part of it? Or was he really kind of the rebel that we can somehow, well imagine and document? Okay, so that would be my question for you, but I just want to run down some facts about the man. Living out of the West Country made him an outdoorsman, confident, a neighborly person, flexibly tolerant about the differences in culture. Went to the Inns of Court to become trained as a lawyer in the common law, studied the classics and the idea of public-literary culture in lots of events that happened in the Inns of Court when he was there in the 1590s. His counsel for New England connections growing through his lawyerly work and his desire, for a home took him to Mass Bay in 1624. There he saw the transatlantic fair means code of relations and coexistence that was in dominant use in the fur trade with the Native American Northeast, okay, and the native peoples who lived there. Morton saw Plymouth's 3 years, Weymouth's 2 years methods and what they had come to, producing needless conflict and self-wrecking murder, really. And so as a Renaissance observer first, Morton chose the transatlantic methods. And in 3 years, his 3 years, he was mine host of Merrymount, trading with a 13,000-year-old native civilization that he deeply appreciated and respected. He did nothing illegal by trading guns or dangerous in intermarrying with the native women in order to create a social fabric that could police their relations of trade with each other. And so those and a hope for a common future and compassion and respect for the future of America crowned the 1627 rebels with America's first poetry in English. That was Morton's vision. And from there, even with the legal right on his side every step of the way, he was banished and burned out and imprisoned and exiled 3 times over. All right. Then demonized to be a business as the first business of the nascent Puritan American Empire that within 10 years of his to the month of his May Day rebels, lashed out blindly to try to exterminate the Pequots and take over the Connecticut River Valley. So the reckless libertine Morton entered imperial education. He was the first one banned in Beantown, you might say, and we're still trying to recover against the war state that took over this place and its needless catastrophes, at which Morton was laughing. Or at least we think so. So let me return you to our question. Do you think he was a romantic who got sucked up and used by the imperial colonial system? Or do you think he was deeply and genuinely rebellious against that and was worthy of the imitation down the years of so many wonderful American writers about nature and coincidentally, almost always about progress in human life.
May I answer, Jack?
Sure.
I think he was more of a practical man rather than an idealist, because if we call someone romantic, I think that will be problematic, because what did romantics do? They had a peculiar filter, a lens for looking at the outer reality. I think
Yes.
Morton was a realist and he was a practical man. And he was, as far as I have learned from your talks, he was, how can I say, he was, his appeal towards people, towards the new environment, was more cautious than other colonial reporters, while describing the place, while connecting with people. He was more of the practical reality rather than idealist one. This is the way I feel about him.
I really appreciate that. Nina?
Yeah, I agree. I have two thoughts though three. One is today, I don't know what day it is over there, but today is 15th, Beware the Ides of March, which fits in with all of this. And the other thing is that the only normal people are the ones you don't know very well. We're all weird in our own spectacular ways. So, but to follow up on what Yonca was saying, I think his framework for seeing was practical, and it was different from the people around him. But I wouldn't describe him as a romantic or a rebel. I would describe him as a practical, visionary man who wanted to enjoy the beauty of many things.
Yeah, I don't think he would have been a rebel if the Puritans had left him alone. Dennis?
Yeah, just to add on to that, I think I agree with both of those points. I kind of compare him, I think of him as an existentialist or an absurdist, really. Way. I think of him as, I compare him with, I don't know if you've read Albert Camus, The Plague, and there's this character, Dr.
Sure.
Roux, in the face of the plague, this guy just keeps plodding on, in the midst of all this craziness and, madness, in the face of a plague, he just continues going on, plodding forward. And I think of Morton kind of in that vein, seeing the absurdities of the world that he was up against, but yet in a very practical way, moving forward, plodding his way, and kind of in a way moving toward a vision. Recognizing that he wasn't the end all. He saw his life in a certain framework, a time framework, and I think he recognized that he would have some influence at some point, even after he was gone. I think that might be an obvious point, but certainly he was trying to change the world he was living in. So,
and look what he did with it. He gives us twice the chance to recover, to remember, to acquire a sense of flexibility and good humor and cooperation and basic respect. Are these utopian values? I really don't think so. He kind of stands by them in the deep parts of his character as we can read it. And, I was thinking so much about his influences too. There's this wonderful phrase that, well, I shouldn't have said that because it was mine, but I called him at one point a pastoral realist. All right. And some literary critics liked that phrase. They said, geez, that is Morton. That is what he is. He's very exposed to the classical and the ancient inheritance of human beings, and he finds that in Native America. And so if that's at least half the lens through which he's looking at the landscape, he's still realistic about it, as Yonca said. He's still a practical person. As I mentioned, I think this is consistent with why whenever he uses a classical allusion in his writing about a local situation, it's exactly descriptive of what he's talking about in New England. That's a guy who hasn't wasted his time. He has read carefully. He remembers everything. and his eyes are wide open every step he takes. It's funny. It's just funny. He's wild.
Yeah, it's funny as shit.
Yeah.
There's
Yeah.
nobody who comes close to Morton in the 17th century. I don't think in the 18th century. It's really, Nathaniel Hawthorne who comes along and, brings this whole idea of, of the Puritans, at that time that he was criticizing, but he brings the same sense of comedy, and lays it against the Puritans of his.
Yeah.
So,
And not in his writings, but Hawthorne added a little quip. He said, "Let us thank God for giving us such sturdy ancestors as the Pilgrims and the Puritans, and let us thank him again for every day that passes between us and them."
Huh. What's amazing to me is that even though I can't recall reading Hawthorne, I've heard the name, I've heard all of those names. I had never heard of Thomas Morton until Dennis mentioned it a while ago when we were in Weymouth looking at the spot where the maypole was erected and then reading your book. So, I think it's really important to continue to get this information out. And as you were saying earlier, and we all agree, having a film showing a history, the beginnings of colonial America, or whatever you want to call it, coming into this 13,000-year-old cultured land, seeing it in a different perspective as a film would do a lot to open people's minds and give them the opportunity to think about our history.
Yeah, because the likability and the charisma of Dustin Hoffman in Little Big Man is the ball carrier. You see, you can't break into film anymore. You've got to get online behind 100,000 other people who all have an idea about a movie that saves the earth and blah, 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 right? But we don't realize that saving is done within each of us. Morton speaking to each of us with that, and his charm and his charisma, likability, will carry that story into some point where, I know he's passed on, God bless him, but Robin Williams, he met with Matt Damon and Ben Affleck out here in Cambridge somehow, and they managed to get their script for Good Will Hunting to him, and he became the ball carrier who brought the film to Hollywood and said, "This is going to be great. You got to do this." And they bought it from him and made it happen. So that's what we kind of do. It's funny. I hope what I'm seeing is a kind of eagerness in all of us to make this movie happen. That's coming out spontaneously, out of sync with the rest of our program.
I think Matt Damon would.
So I hope people will listen to that and agitate for a Thomas Morton movie. Anybody you know, the odds are that either you watching or us four, somewhere we know Kevin Bacon.
What how could it miss? The chief villain's going to be Captain Fish, right? Isn't that his name? Miles Standish. What was his name?
Captain Shrimp.
Captain Shrimp. I'm sorry, Captain Shrimp. Every time I go by his statue, I think of him.
Many years ago, I always thought that Stephen Fry would be the perfect actor to play Thomas Morton because he's so much like Thomas Morton. But nowadays, I think still there's time for him. Liam Neeson would be an excellent Thomas Morton.
Yes, because he has that added respectability.
Yeah, and a funny thing, Thomas Morton in his day was about 20 years older than any of the Puritans and Pilgrims he had to deal with.
That's wow.
Yeah, that's a funny thing to realize, that he was talking down to his juniors and they're tyrannizing this learned elder of theirs,
I would love to work on a screenplay. I have.
Oh, don't say that. You haven't read mine yet.
Okay, I'll read yours.
Go ahead.
No, I have a similar script that I haven't finished with Final Draft Pro, and I have 2 connections if I ever get around to finishing it. But this sounds more important because it is historical. And so,
remember I mentioned the 28 million viewers listening to C-SPAN Pilgrim Text?
Yeah.
Well, if we could get Morton in front of them as well, it wouldn't be a problem. His music alone, as you heard in the first segment of this, as I recited his voice about Native American nature, would carry the ball right there. I really believe that.
So interesting idea for sure. And I'm interested in, the way we look at Morton is through the lens of let's say Shakespearean England, because he brings a lot of those same literary qualities and perceptions and attitudes into play. But what I think people really have to learn is, his enemies, and who were they? What were they like? Who is this Captain Shrimp? And I think a movie is, a way of bringing these characters into into the light, and understanding that there are so many statues of Miles Standish around Massachusetts. Does anybody know what kind of a monster he was? It's like, in the South, we've gotten rid of a lot of the statues of the monsters who came and committed.
Well, let me tell you a funny, quick anecdote about exactly this. In 1623, as I mentioned, the Weymouth and the Pilgrim people together resolved to murder a number of native leaders who were speaking out against them for righteous offenses, okay? And ultimately, they created a monument to Miles Standish in Duxbury. It's listed as the world's tallest historical monument. And he stands up on top of it, looking out to sea over foreign oil supplies, I guess. But in 1923, almost to the day when the massacre happened in Weymouth, a bolt of lightning struck that statue and blasted its head off.
That's got to be
now. You remember that Standish put Widawamate's head on top of the church at Plymouth and left it there many years to ruin their own trade, by the way. And so this was this unbelievably uncanny event. Now, this year is 400 years at Weymouth, and at Wessagusset Park in Weymouth, there's going to be some events. Let's put it that way. There's a beautiful nature garden that a dear friend of mine restored on her own effort over the years into a beautiful nature walk right near the sea. And there's going to be a remembrance of these events. And I would urge everybody to kind of look into that on Facebook and elsewhere. Her name is Jody Quinlan, Quinlan, Jodi, Jody Quinlan. And it's, well, significant to me that the turning of the tide, we live in such dire times under nuclear war and permanent war and environmental degradation. And Morton is a reminder that there's still goodness, there's still resources that we can call upon within ourselves and from each other. His time is going to come, as the front part of my book, I think, attests.
I just want to say everything that you laid out, especially the 100-year lightning bolt, is perfect for a film. I mean, visually, it's fabulous. So that should be included.
On my website, ancientlights.org, there's a photograph from the newspaper at that time. There's a little girl sitting next to Miles Standish's head at the bottom of the giant monument. It's for real.
And that's great to contrast against the head the brutality that we claim only Saudis do or whatever.
Dennis, do we dare that nature is on our side?
Do we dare? Well, we can assume that, but we never know the end point. We only know, we can only judge at the midpoint. If we get blasted out of the water, there might be something further in the future that the gods are planning. So, no, I think that was basically Morton's whole understanding in life, that maybe the gods are not going to be for me, and I'm speaking metaphorically, but I'm going to still do this. And I think people have to do that. I think that's how we have to live out our lives. So
balance the tension between how horrible things are and still looking and trying to understand and make things better. There's always that tension, and it's high. The stakes are so high right now. I don't know.
Said it in part one. We become what we honor and imitate. We should be imitating Thomas Morton on the human frontier that's still alive in our midst. And we should be imitating the Minoans of ancient Crete, and not the war state of the Mycenaeans, whose first hurrah was sacking Crete, their teachers, and whose last hurrah was the sack of Troy. And then they fell apart in all of 200 years. This is the beginning of patriarchy. So I think Morton was pretty comfortable in those matricultural Native American villages. whole different idea of power and existence right there for him.
Beware the Ides of March
Yeah.
in this country.
But the words are spoken to Caesar, aren't they? Not to us. They're spoken to
They are.
Caesar.
Well,
He's about to get his due. He's
right.
about to get his due when he's warned for that.
Well, I
Look
wrote
at Dennis perk up.
No, I'm trying to recall the story.
political so-called leaders, you know, they should
That's
beware.
the truth. Yeah.
So
So can let me propose one thing. We're going to do maybe one or two readings from Morton's own language as I've come to understand it. And I just want to mention also that the city of Quincy today partners in a way their cleanup of the town every spring with a Morton event at Maypole Hill. So you might want to get in touch with Quincy Parks Department to see if anything at all is going on there. The further resources are Ancient Lights, the Morton film at YouTube, Thomas Morton and the Maypole of Merrymount, and Rebels 375. We celebrated many years ago there, Rebels 375. Run that at YouTube and see the wonderful musical and other clips you'll see of what people are doing nowadays. The community that claims Morton's Rebels, and that should be Quincy above all, but is going to claim the oldest civic festival in the United States.
and we'll
Think about it.
We'll include that information at the end point after the discussion. It'll be on.
Well, we just did too. Yeah. So
hang on, everybody. If you're with us still at this point, just
sure.
Okay.
I'm sorry we lost Yonca.
Yeah.
She'll be back.
She's busy. She's on the other side of the world like you. So it's hard to make these times work for everybody. So anyway, yeah. So you had a poem for us.
Okay, would you like to hear the poem, or could I offer a little segment of each of the three books out of Canaan and then give you the poem and the song? I actually have my guitar here if you want to hear the song.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. All right, I'll dive right in. These are brief, but I think pretty trenchantly selected from what Morton had to say in book one, the first 20 chapters of New English Canaan, whose title and that setup put in front the fact that there were native people here in New England that had to be dealt with and respected. He says, chapter 20, that the salvages, that is the people of the woods with an L, live a contented life. A gentleman and a traveler that had been in the parts of New England for a time, when he returned again, in his discourse of the country wondered, as he said, that the natives of the land lived so poorly in so rich a country, like to our beggars in England. Surely that gentleman had not time or leisure while he was there truly to inform himself of the state of that country and the happy life the salvages would lead were they once brought to Christianity. Now, since it is but food and raiment that men that live needeth, though not all alike, why should not the natives of New England be said to live richly, having no want of either? Clothes are the badge of sin, and the more variety of fashions is but the greater abuse of the creature. The beasts of the forest there do serve to furnish them at any time when they please. Fish and flesh they have in great abundance, which they both roast and boil. They are indeed not served in dishes of plate with wide variety of sauces to procure appetite that needs not there. The rarity of the air, begot by the medicinable quality of the sweet herbs of the country, always procures good stomachs to the inhabitants. I must need commend them in this particular, that though they buy many commodities of our nation, yet they keep but few, and those of special use. They love not to be cumbered with many utensils, and although every proprietor knows his own, yet all things, so long as they will last, are used in common amongst them. A biscuit cake given to one, that one breaks it equally into so many parts as there be persons in his company, and distributes it. Plato's Commonwealth is so much practiced by these people. And to just add a final thing, according to human reason, guided only by the light of nature, these people lead the more happy and freer life, being void of care, which torments the minds of so many Christians. They are not delighted in baubles, but in useful things. I observe they will not be troubled with superfluous commodities. Such things as they find are taught by necessity to make use of, they will make choice of, and seek to purchase with industry. So that in respect that their life is so void of care, they are so loving also that they make use of those things they enjoy, the wife only excepted, as common goods, and are therein so compassionate that rather than one should starve through want, they would starve all. Thus do they pass away the time merrily, not regarding our pomp, which they see daily before their faces, but are better content with their own, which some men so meanly esteem of. Excuse me.
Yeah. Herewith we find the reason why they wanted to get rid of them. Yeah, that's a remarkable testimony. And
First part, he's telling it like it is and making fun of the men that don't see the freedom and the collaborative nature of the people he's criticizing. It's just
Yeah. It's a hard standard to live up to when you really open your eyes. Excuse me.
Yeah. Well, it's very sad. It's a very sad, tale, when you consider the promise that, a cooperative agreement between the English and Native Americans in New England would have resulted in. I mean, it would have been a completely different history, of course. But when you think about the possibilities, it's a very sad story. And I guess
I don't know how different it would be. Sorry, because
no.
Yeah, go ahead. You want to talk, Jack? Go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
Because as our cousins across the pond are very much involved in our 800 military bases, etc., and are very much a part of our empire. So I don't know how to think of that as a possible better outcome had they joined. If they had adopted the transatlantic trade and stayed with that and thought more of Morton, then there would have been that possibility. But
empire is the word here, right? Because the imperial historians that followed Morton's generation and told you what to like and what to dislike and approve and not approve of on the frontier became the teachers of how we behave there, right? But one thing, I mean, my parents grew up in the Depression in the 1930s, and what they realized was how much people need each other. So when the Americans of leaders of every stripe talk about American exceptionalism, they're forgetting that we need each other. They are talking about themselves as the indispensable nation. Well, what does that say to the others? That we can do without you, or we can do without you, but we are the ones who are on the road to progress. And that is the most offensive thing you could imagine saying walking into any party. Right? You're not going to talk to anybody like that, except from an imperium, where we tell people what their role is. And the world is not there anymore. The world has not been there for at least 50 years, 75 years, and America is not aware of this at all. I have American friends that tell me, I don't care about the rest of the world. Well, that's a hell of a weak way to safeguard the well-being of your country. To pretend that it's all by itself and doesn't need anybody.
Well, perhaps
not a good formula.
Morton did see that everything was connected, and there's another way. And in this America, nothing is connected; everything is isolated. And
that's where I mean that he's not a romantic. That he sees that Native people need each other, and so they cooperate and they share. I'm going to share this biscuit with you today because tomorrow maybe you'll have the biscuit. And I'll need you to share it with me. But we've forgotten how we need each other. We've been separated off. And he wants us to get back to something much more human.
It's interesting that a few years after Morton exits the scene, that Roger Williams comes on, and it begins with the same kind of comparisons between English and Native American culture, portraying Native American culture in a very positive vein. Testifying to their generosity and their loving nature, and he also, became exiled. Had to flee to Rhode Island because of his viewpoints. So we see this continuation, of course, and it goes on and on and on and on right into our present time. We see this.
That's for sure.
Over and over again.
That's for sure.
Morton, the quintessential. This is a seminal point of American history that nobody knows about. And
Well, you know, knowing that time flies no matter what you're doing, especially when you're having fun. I remember that I read or recited the part from Morton's book 2, the 10 chapters about American nature, at the beginning of this program in the first episode. So rather than repeat that, it runs for about 90 seconds. I'll read you instead the brief beginning of the Rebels of New Canaan, how it looked when all those people got together on that day. It's kind of rollicking, and there's nothing like it in any other language on the colonial frontier. The inhabitants of Passamaquoddy, having translated the name of their habitation from the ancient salvage name to Merrymount, and being resolved to have the new name confirmed for a memorial to after ages, did devise amongst themselves to have it performed in a solemn manner, with revels and merriment after the old English custom, prepared to set up a maypole upon the festival day of Philip and Jacob, and therefore brewed a barrel of excellent beer, and provided a case of bottles to be spent, with other good cheer, for all the comers of that day. And because they would have it in a complete form, they had prepared a song fitting to the time and present occasion. And upon May Day, they brought the maypole to the place appointed with drums, guns, pistols, and other fitting instruments for that purpose. And there erected it with the help of salvages that came thither of purpose to see the manner of our rebels. A goodly pine tree of 80 foot long was reared up, with a pair of buck's horns nailed on somewhat near the top of it, where it stood as a fair sea mark for directions how to find the way to mine host of Merrymount. And this is a picture, painting of it that David Wagner did for the cover of the book. I designed it and he painted it. He's a genius. Wait till you see his work at ancientlights.org. But that's something about of what it might have looked like on the shore of Boston Bay. So it sounds like quite a day that they had. This is what the Inns of Court would, it's what the Inns of Court would have called solemn foolery. There are things we really mean going on here, but we're having a good time too.
Well, thank you very much.
Great.
I think that's the point at which we're going to cut to the end. So,
all right, Dennis, can I point out one thing then? Since we won't hear the poem and the song here today, people can hear and see both at ancientlights.org on the pages that cover Thomas Morton.
I did hear you sing.
Anything else? I'm sorry.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I did check out the YouTube connection, and I did get to hear you sing the song that Morton wrote or sang.
Well, there's
great.
The people will be hearing a lot more of Morton, and they're going to be hearing a lot more of his music. Hopefully.
That's wonderful. And let's stay positive, all of us watching and here today on the idea of a Morton feature film. It needs to happen.
Yeah, I hope our viewers are listening. And anybody who has a connection to Steven Spielberg, just get a hold.
There you go.
And
Jack,
Jack,
a ball carrier.
Jack.
Dennis, you're the first one. You're the first one who's done a lot for this cause, and I want to thank you on behalf of everybody, for what you've done with this program.
Thank you so much, all of you. And I have, unfortunately, Yonca had to take off early, but
yeah, give her our warmest regards.
All right. Well, we'll be seeing each other again, I'm sure. And thank you again so much.
Thank you. This was great.
Drink and be merry, everyone. Peace.